This is Brass Check, and today we're going to talk about a book called Rulers of America by Anna Rochester. And it was published in 1936. Interestingly enough, it says this book is composed and printed by Union Labor, and the publishers are the International Publishers, New York. And it has a book plate. This came from the library of someone named Alexander Sachs. I can't find anything about him on the internet. He was a special attorney with the Economic Warfare Section, War Division of the Department of Justice, New York, New York. Now that was something that took place during World War II. And the goals of this Economic Warfare Section were to the following things: to discover and analyze important intercompany connections among European firms and the control of these firms by Germans. 2, to analyze the means by which German control could be eliminated. 3, to examine the legal problems that might arise because of the use of intercompany connections by the German government as a means of economic warfare and espionage. 4, to analyze intercompany agreements between foreign and American companies in order to determine their effects on American trade and commerce. 5, to examine the effects of cartel agreements among foreign companies upon the trade, commerce, and business structure of Latin America and other countries. And their focus was further to study particular aspects of international cartels with emphasis on the techniques employed by the Germans to penetrate the economies of other countries, especially the United States. So this book was a really interesting book. I'm not even sure if you can get it on Amazon, in keeping with my usual non-preparation method of preparing. I'm going to look it up right now. Rulers of America. It's a great book. I don't think it's available. That's interesting. Yes, it is. And you can get it for a mere $30.91. And there are 3 available as of this moment. And yeah, pretty reasonably priced. So much in this book, but the thing that I wanted to read confirms something that I've suspected for a long time, and I'm sure people have written about it, but I very rarely hear anyone talk about it, which is that basically the CIA and all other organizations like that in our country are products of the Rockefeller empire. And I'm going to read a little bit about the Rockefeller business methods from the book Rulers of America, and see if you don't recognize the modus operandi. Secrecy has always been one of the most marked characteristics of Rockefeller operations, but secrecy accompanied by systematic fact-finding with elaborate espionage about the affairs of competitors. Dummy firms or companies operating apparently in competition with Standard Oil have been a favorite device for penetrating associations of competitors and for avoiding attack. Dummies have also been used to acquire stock in competing companies with stealthily build up Rockefeller control from within. So espionage was part of the Rockefeller business model from day one, creating fake organizations, cutouts, to do your dirty work for you so that you can hide behind them. It's a favorite device of Standard Oil. Standard Oil is companies like Chevron, Exxon, Mobil. You know, those companies were all split up, but they're still under the control of the Rockefeller empire. I mean, the actual Rockefellers are mostly gone or buried or living on private islands, but the organization they left behind is still intact. And the oil companies, which, if you put them together, are the biggest companies in the world, still, after all these years, also owned banks and mining companies and, all kinds of things. They were involved in the fake charity business, the fake education business. This is still a massive, massive enterprise, and it was based on espionage and fakery. Occasionally, so many competitors were simply squeezed out and destroyed. Occasionally, agents of the Standard companies were responsible for destroying the physical property of competitors. At least one such case was proved in Buffalo in 1881. The directors of Vacuum Oil were indicted, but the only men convicted were 2 local managers. Rockefeller blandly maintained that he and Standard Oil had nothing whatsoever to do with Vacuum Oil and heartily disapproved of such methods. As a matter of fact, 3/4 of Vacuum was owned by Standard Oil just 2 years before the sabotage, and the local managers responsible for it were punished only by paying small fines, and they continued in their positions undisturbed. So way back in 1881, and that was only one of the cases that the Rockefellers were caught in, they actually engaged in violence using a plausible deniability cutout. 1881. So this stuff wasn't invented with Oliver North, and all those guys. This goes back to Standard Oil. When Rockefeller met strong opposition, as in the 1877 battle, so this goes way back with the Pennsylvania Railroad, he mobilized all his resources of brains and trickery and political influence and poured out thousands of dollars to accomplish his purpose. He was in search of monopoly power. What else can we say about this guy? Last but not least, Rockefeller knew the importance of having friends within the political machine. Schoolmate at Owego of Tom Platt, who became Republican boss of New York State, and schoolmate in Cleveland of Mark Hanna. These are all Rockefeller's schoolboy chums. The first leader of the Ohio Gang, a political gang. Rockefeller retained their friendships and never hesitated to manipulate political appointments in the interest of Standard Oil. Meanwhile, Payne and others functioned for Standard Oil in the Democratic Party. And then a guy named John D. Archbold, one of Rockefeller's chosen intimates, became perhaps the boldest dispenser of bribes in the history of American capitalism. So I'm going to just read that one again. Best buddy and close friend of Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller, John Archbold. John Dustin Archbold became perhaps the boldest dispenser of bribes in the history of American capitalism, up until 1936 at least, but still, you have to admit, that's quite an accomplishment. John Dustin Archbold, born in Leesburg, Ohio in 1848. So you have a company that's based on covert action, based on espionage, based on using cutouts, based on violence executed with plausible deniability, and based on political corruption, and employed the guy who has the distinction of being considered the boldest dispenser of bribes in the history of American capitalism. And they don't really talk too much about him. The industrial workers of the world knew enough about him to try to kill him. So I guess he was pretty well known. He bribed the Republican Party. He was a busy fellow. So that's the roots of Standard Oil, Rockefeller money. And now let's look at the history of the CIA. The CIA was started by a guy named Bill Donovan, who was actually, the name of their group was the OSS. And Donovan had been working with the Rockefeller Foundation from an early age. And they sent Donovan to go to Europe on a, quote, war relief mission in 1915. Okay, so he has a long history with the Rockefellers before the OSS started. And the OSS, again, was the forerunner of the CIA. So so not only did the Rockefellers behave like the CIA behaves, with acts of violence and using thugs and plausible deniability and espionage and fake cutouts and bribing politicians, just behaving in despicable ways. Their founder was a Rockefeller man. What else can we say? Well, during World War II, the head of British intelligence said that we need some friendship with the Americans. This is before the war started. And Stevenson, known as from the book A Man Called Intrepid, the head of intelligence for the UK, went to the Rockefellers and said, "Hey, we need some help. What we can do to get the Rockefellers' help is we can offer access to our espionage in exchange for their financial support in the United States." And the Rockefellers thought that was a great idea, and they gave Stevenson an entire floor, rent-free, at Rockefeller Center. And that's where OSS, the forerunner of the CIA, was operated, out of Rockefeller Center with the endorsement and the subsidy of the Rockefellers. And Allen Dulles and all those related monsters, all were in and out of the Rockefeller Center office. Allen Dulles opened a branch of the Coordinator of Information, which was a competitor of the CIA during World War II, of the OSS. It's not that complicated a history, but it emerged and disappeared. And on it goes. So you can actually find all this on the internet. It's not hard to discover. And you'll see that, in fact, the CIA, from its very earliest days, was a Rockefeller-infused organization with the values of the Rockefellers. And another Rockefeller value I didn't mention, is absolute hatred of organized labor. I mean, hatred, homicidal hatred. And you can track the Rockefellers' history and see how many times they were involved in violence against striking industrial workers. So anyway, if you never thought about it before, and never been told it before, or never had it laid out for you before, the CIA is basically a Rockefeller/oil industry creation. And that explains why everything is done by the CIA on behalf of the oil industry and its accompanying industries, the drug industry, illegal and legal, and the chemical industry. And what does the CIA do when they're in other foreign countries? They undermine governments, they bribe leaders, they assassinate difficult leaders, they participate in repression, they participate in disrupting labor organizations. So it's all a continuity. And it goes back to the 19th century when John D. Rockefeller was organizing what essentially was a criminal enterprise that just happened to sell oil, but it was run on criminal principles. So that's a little American history that you may never have heard before, and you can get a lot of it from this book called Rulers of America. And if you just Google the OSS and the Rockefellers and the CIA, you'll see that it's almost, I mean, literally the CIA was born in the Rockefeller's guest house, right? If you want to look at it that way, I mean that's how close the two organizations are.